Don't fall for Anthony Albanese's spin that the boos he got last night when he was living it up again at the Australian Open was just a traditional booing that Prime Ministers always get. In fact, last year, the crowd at the Australian Open gave him a big cheer.
Give us a wave, Albo!
What was that, Josh?
Someone from the crowd yelled, "Give us a wave, Albo, our Prime Minister," and he's obliged.
But last night, just 1 year later, the crowd gave Albanese the biggest boo I've heard for a Prime Minister since Malcolm Fraser's time.
On behalf of Tennis Australia, I'd like to welcome Victorian Governor, Her Excellency, the Honourable Professor Margaret Gardner, the Australian Prime Minister, the Honourable Anthony Albanese, the Deputy Victorian Premier, the Honourable Ben Carroll. Thank you.
Albanese tried today to laugh it off as, you know, just the usual.
Do you have thick skin, Anthony, or does that still sort of get to you? I mean, a crowd of people booing, you know?
Oh, no, it's an Australian tradition.
Joining me is Michael Kroger, former President of the Victorian Liberals, and Steve Conroy, former Labor Senator and Cabinet Minister. Are you going to say, Stephen, that this was just the usual booing?
Well, there is a long tradition, and many Prime Ministers have been booed.
Cheered. This year?
No, I mean, last year, no question. Big rapturous applause. This year, not so rapturous. Not so rapturous.
Geez, polite, isn't it?
Not so rapturous.
I love that. That's what you call a euphemism.
So the praise was modified. But you don't take anything out of that.
Look, I think Albo's lost some paint over the last few months, and I think that was a representation of it. Do I think that, you know, as some are gleefully predicting a one-term government, Albo's finished, I think that's getting a little carried away. I think we've got an important by-election in Dunkley, a seat that, frankly, you know, Bruce Bilson held for many, many years. I mean, Dunkley, the Liberals held it with Bruce. And I just need to, just for the sake of any suggestion, the Liberal candidate named Conroy is no relation to me whatsoever.
I'm sure Bruce Bilson would have appreciated your kind words about how good he was at the time rather than after. No. But Michael, what do you make of it? Because Steve's right. I mean, this is not what the Prime Minister would want to hear in the most left-wing state in the country just a few weeks before a by-election.
Probably still with, what, 1 million people still watching? It's a big number. Look, Dunkley, by the way, changed by 3%. There was a 3% change, the boundary, so after Bruce left. So that's why it's a 6.3% Labor seat. No, Andrew, terrible, shocking. But the problem is, if you tell a lie and tell it often enough, it will not be forgotten. This guy's credibility is shot. And today we saw Chalmers trying to say, oh, no, we've got no intention of bringing back, you know, negative gearing or whatever. No one believes these people anymore, nor should they, Andrew.
Well, you just mentioned Jim Chalmers trying to hose down reports, suggestions that there are Labor MPs that want him now to revisit negative gearing, among other things, which the government promised before the election it wouldn't touch. Here's the questioning of him today.
We're not contemplating or considering resurrecting the policies that we took to the 2019 election. We're not contemplating other areas.
See, this is the rod that Anthony Albanese made for his own back, right? Because now Jim Chalmers can say all that. He knows no one's going to believe it.
I mean, that is the difficulty that, you know, Albo and the government now have. They've got to reconcile their statements on a whole range of other issues now with the change in position adopted. Now, they obviously, I don't believe, would, you know, remotely want to go down the path that, you know, maybe some excited backbenchers might think is the way to go. So I think there'll be a steady as she goes. I don't think there's any chance that those things will happen. But to Michael's point, you know, this has taken paint off the Prime Minister, off Jim Chalmers, off every Labor frontbencher.
Steve, if you had been in that cabinet, there's no way you would have said yes to this. This is exactly the issue. They can say all they like in front of the cameras. No one now can take that Their word is no longer their bond.
In their heart, Andrew, in their heart, they all want the 19 policies, the 2019 policies.
Yeah.
They believe in doing something about capital gains tax relief, right? They want to reduce the
Mate, no one knew what a franking credit was.
They want to get.
Let's not get too excited about in their hearts.
Credits. You know, in your heart,
I'd never heard of franking credits.
You want to tax capital gains on the sale of the family home. In your heart, you know that's what Labor want to do, and everyone out there now knows that. Everyone knows that. All of those policies in 19, the same people are there. Even Bill Shorten's still there. Bowen's still there. Albanese's still there. Plebiscite's still there. The same people that argued for that in 19, what, they don't believe it anymore? Of course they do, Andrew, and that's why this bloke Chalmers cannot be believed.
Look, whether they believe it or not, my point is really that no one will trust whatever they say, and that is the damage here. It was interesting. This scares me. The government's just appointed Greg Combay to replace former Liberal Treasurer Peter Costello as the head of the Future Fund. Now, that's supposed to manage $270 billion or whatever it is now to pay for things like the superannuation of public service so we don't run out of money down the track. Very tempting pot of money for a big spending government that has been trying to urge super funds to invest their savings in its climate schemes, which are running behind a schedule. Now, Greg Combay, Steve, he's a former Labor climate change minister, you know him very well, of course, and has been chairman of the government's Net Zero Economy Agency. How safe are those super savings from being invested in Labor schemes?
Look. Firstly, Greg is a friend of mine. I did serve with him in cabinet. But if you look at Greg's recent history, he has been chair of industry funds management. He's been in charge of billions of dollars of Australian savings. And at no stage has there been any suggestion that Greg or anyone in IFM ever suggested that they just decide to go off on a frolic of their own.
They will say it's nation building.
He is a safe pair of hands.
Governments will back it.
All of those stories existed for the last 18 months. Greg was in the chair. And there was no frolics, there was no wandering off. If there was a good return to be got for members' interests and members' long-term benefits, then they were investing in it. But there was no frolics because the government said go and do this. So putting Greg Combay in charge of the super fund is a very safe pair of hands.
Michael, my concern is this. The government will say, if you do that, we're going to back it. We've got all these policies. We're going to force Australians to use more of this energy, this green energy, et cetera, and then all these super funds get invested. What that does is create a massive disincentive to then, say, oh, listen, green energy is not good. We've got to cut back on the government subsidies and whatever. How can you when the nation's savings are riding on it?
So the Board of the Future Fund regulates itself. It has investments in 12, 15, 20 different areas: private equity, venture capital, equities markets here and there, the bond market, venture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Combay can easily increase investments in some of the areas you're talking about. And why wouldn't he? So he's always believed that. And Stephen, to say a member of the socialist left is a safe pair of hands when it comes to economics, that just doesn't gel with anybody. And the socialist left person, when he sees a cookie jar, he sticks his hand right in it. That's always been the history of the Labor Party.
Yeah.
They can't help
Greg Combay was trusted enough by Scott Morrison.
It's a very bad appointment. They should have appointed someone from the financial markets.
Scott Morrison appointed Greg Combay to the COVID Commission to look after all of our interests with a group of other individuals. So your government previously trusted Greg's safe pair of hands, and that's absolutely why
that's not quite my issue.
Australian should be worried about this appointment. They should cheer.
We shall see. The Prime Minister must be desperate, Stephen. He's appointed Catherine Murphy, the political editor of the far-left Guardian Australia, to his office. Talk about hiring someone out of touch with the punters he needs to reconnect to, the struggle street. But just as interesting is a sarcastic reaction of Opposition Leader Peter Dutton. He said, I'm genuinely shocked to see Murpharoo, Catherine Murphy, take up a spot to now be officially running lines for Labor. The real outrage is David Crowe missed out. What must he do to prove his credentials to be formally employed by the Labor Party? David Crowe is the chief political correspondent, also left-wing, Melbourne Age, Sydney Morning Herald, newspapers. What do you make of that? Is it wise?
I think it is demeaning of Peter Dutton, and there's no need. I mean, if you were to, the normal ABC attack, but these are both private companies who have their own capital, whether it's The Guardian or Channel 9, and they're entitled to hire journalists who are, you know, a different perspective. Look, I've known David Crowe. I've known David Crowe for nearly 25 years.
You make an excellent point.
I don't consider him to be left-wing at all. No. And Catherine Murphy...
He's not left-wing at all.
Catherine Murphy is as good a friend to me,
David's
Andrew.
a right-winger.
Catherine Murphy is as good a friend to me as you are, Andrew, and I say that sincerely.
Fine.
And Catherine...
All of them.
And Catherine
Kevin
Murphy
Rudd.
is an excellent journalist. You might not agree with her views, but she is rigorous. She is qualified.
She is way with the fairies on global warming, which is one of the issues that it's going to be a tsunami over Labor's head. And I think she's a religious maniac on that sense. And I think this will cost Labor.